Firstly, it is very humbling to hear such a glowing introduction. I'm not sure I deserved all that. Um, Also, I'm a second generation person and we have it easy. The first generation is the real hero of this, this business, this work. Um, Dr. Sudarshan ji is an amazing entrepreneur, and I had the opportunity to read up on him quite a bit. It's very, very impressive. And I'd like to thank the family, Mrs. Reva, Gautam, Sandeep, and Chetan to invite me here. I am very touched by this gesture. I'm going to share my experiences of the last 3.5 decades or so of being at the helm of Dr. Reddy's and what we did well, what we did not do well, and what are some of the lessons that I learned along the way. Before that, I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about Dr. Reddy himself, who's our founder. He was also a first generation person. There are many similarities in the journey that I saw of Dr. Sudarshan ji as well as Dr. Anji Reddy. He was a passionate scientist, and I saw that Sudarshan ji was also a technologist at heart. And both of them worked for other companies. Dr. Reddy worked for Indian Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited before he started his entrepreneurial journey. And there are many things that I can say are parallels between these two forces, these powerful forces that shaped the ecosystems of both our enterprises. Dr. Reddy was a passionate scientist, and for him, that mattered much more than the business and the profits. He was, like an artist. An artist is consumed by his art, and of course it fetches him money also. But it's the art that moves him. That same way it used to be the science. He was also, like all scientists, wanting to be the first always to do something, to patent the product or to discover something in the lab. It's a race among all the community, scientific community, to find something. But he brought that same pioneership to the business also. So he always took great pride in saying, we are the first to do this, no matter whether it made money or not. And I could see that in your enterprise also. I mean, who would have imagined 25 years ago that an electric car would be so commonplace? And today it is. But two decades ago to imagine this. And I remember seeing this car on the streets of London. I was wondering whether it was registered and sold there, exported there, or was it just a curiosity there? I don't know. But I experienced it there. So similarly, I think the third thing that Dr. Reddy was very well known for was his trust in people. Once he trusted somebody, he empowered them completely. And I was the beneficiary of that. When I joined the company at the age of 30 as managing director, CEO at that time, he gave me complete operating freedom, but also held me responsible for everything. Even in a crisis, I could go to him and he would say, I don't know, it's your job, you should do it. And in that, he made me stronger and also helped me discover my own potential. So in this sense, when you trust somebody, empower them, I think you also get that back in the organization. And the last thing was he was also a philanthropist at heart. And I was just telling my friend here that I'm not a philanthropist. I'm not really motivated so much by social work. And I feel that the impact that I do in the enterprise will have a ripple effect somewhere. But he at his heart had a deep concern for the important societal problems. And in fact, the business itself that we started was based on a societal problem. So I talked about the founder here because founders have a disproportionate impact on the DNA of the company. And I'm sure Dr. Maini's DNA is part of every aspect of what you do in the Maini group today. So in that sense, I think founders are very, very important. Their DNA becomes the culture of the enterprise, and it has a lasting impact if done well. I'm not going to take you through a few slides about Dr. Reddy's because My story is the Dr. Reddy story. There's nothing apart from that. My whole life has been working for this company and making it successful and taking it where it is today. Of course, with the help of many, many people in my journey. This slide talks about who we are. We have two values that we cherish, which is empathy and dynamism. And empathy is not a soft empathy. It is really putting ourselves in the shoes of the others to understand them. And we use this to really uncover patient needs, unmet patient needs. We put ourselves in their shoes, understand the problems that are going through, and find solutions. The second principle is dynamism. Dynamism is about finding solutions that we uncover through empathy. And we bring creativity, speed, agility, and all together it is called dynamism in our language. And our credo is about good health can't wait. What it means is that we are in the business of health, and there's an urgency to it. We can't let people wait for good health. Good health can't wait. And the impact we make on them is through affordable medicines, making them accessible around the world wherever they are needed, and innovation to find solutions to unmet medical needs. This is who we are. The promises are the ones that define what we do. And this is important because we are saying that you must expect all of this from every employee of Dr. Reddy's. It is about making medicines more affordable. And affordable is not making it the lowest cost product in the market, but really looking at the most expensive products and bringing their prices down so that they're affordable. Addressing unmet patient needs through innovation, helping patients manage their disease better in their journey from illness to wellness, and that is part, we actually own that, though we are not care providers, we understand that journey and help them through that journey. Then we also collaborate with many partners in global health, with other companies around the world to help take our medicines to all parts of the world. We also collaborate with foundations like the Gates Foundation or the WHO or the GARDP, many such organizations which are in public health, and help them in their work to ensure medicines are available wherever they're needed. We did a lot of this during COVID, and it helped really alleviate suffering in many, many countries. And finally, we also work with partners, and we measure our success as how we have helped them succeed in their journey. So these are the promises we make to all our stakeholders. I'm going to skip this slide. This is a slide of values. But like everything else in the world, I think every company, you have value statements. But value statements are only as good as how you live them. And just articulating them is not enough. Each of us are living examples of how we live these values. The big one here, I think, is the respect for the individual, and this is something I will come back to later when I talk about our people philosophy. So these are our businesses. We are 3.3 billion as on FY24. We have about 25,000 employees. We have, give or take, a few hundred up and down. Our foundational business is the active ingredients. This is the business Dr. Reddy started his career with, making the active ingredient which actually works in the medicine. It's a small molecule, complex organic synthesis is involved, and that was his first innovation in India. In those days, in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, India used to depend for their active ingredient needs in the West. Even China was not evolved at that time. It was largely Italy, Spain, some from America, but most of it was from Europe. And India was fledgling at that time. And in fact, the government had a scheme, if multinationals had to sell their products here, they had something called ratio norms. If you sold $100 of medicine here, you had to make $20 of active ingredient within India. And that's how actually the industry started, but they would do very little synthesis, the last two steps or something, just to get meet the ratio norms. It was not a profitable or a core activity for them. So the industry had to pay high prices, depend on imports for this. And that is the segment that Dr. Reddy started with. And in those days, being a pioneer, being first, among the first to do this, just doing it, we made money. And that gave us a lucky break for the organization to build up its profitability, build up its size, and then build businesses based on that. So then we went on vertical integrated into generics, branded, unbranded, biologics later on. Of course, we also have an innovation arm called in drug discovery. In the early days, we used to do drug discovery in metabolic disorders, cardiovascular diseases, but now we focus on cancer, oncology. Today, our focus on expanding our portfolio is in the areas of consumer health. You must have just read we made an acquisition a couple of days ago in Europe for nicotine replacement therapy. So consumer health is a new initiative for us. Novel therapeutics, developing internally as well as licensing in, collaborating with global companies and bringing them to countries which needed them. And then, of course, digital solutions. We have a product for migraine, which is just stimulates your nerves and drug-free remedy for migraine. So this is the company today. And broadly, our market is split about close to half in the US. And the next biggest market is India. And then after that, Russia, Europe, and a clutch of other emerging markets. The company, when it started, and I think this is important, identity of the company, who you are, is also important, and it shapes the culture of the organization in many ways. When we started, it was about technology. It was about synthesizing molecules and launching them. It was largely a technology company, and actually our tagline was, technology is our strength. And when we look back at it, it's kind of sounds very outdated, but at that point, the focus was on technology. And every day the excitement was about how the technology is evolving, how are we reducing costs, how are we bringing in new products, and that drove everything. And if you met somebody on the corridor, they would ask, what are we working on? How is the breakthrough? Is there anything interesting? So that was the first 15 years or so of the existence of the company. And then in 2001, when we merged all the companies, we rebranded the company and at that time we were a research-intensive company. Dr. Reddy was very passionate about drug discovery and wanted to make a difference to the world through original research, bringing in molecules discovered in India and for the entire world. Of course, it didn't happen at that time, and that was not a successful venture. And in fact, his biography is called The Unfinished Agenda, because he could not in his lifetime do this. So at the same time, our businesses were growing elsewhere, active ingredients, generics, branded generics, biosimilars. They were on a great trajectory, and we were growing very, very fast. And we had this tagline of life, research, hope, which about 300 scientists were probably inspired by that, in the sense that we are going to discover drugs through research and bring it to the world. So a large portion of the company was kind of not connecting to this purpose. So I think somewhere in 2014, 15, I don't remember, we rebranded the company around health, around our business is health, and it is not just pharmaceuticals. And we also needed to inject a sense of urgency, because the company was getting a little big, fat, and a little lazy. So we had to bring that energy back, and that's when we coined this good health can't wait. Good health is about expanding our focus from medicines to health, which means we could go into preventive health, nutrition, and various other allied businesses which we are in now. And it's served us well, and I think it'll serve us well for another decade or so. After that, we don't know what's going to happen, but as of now, good health can't wait is the credo of the company. And this, just wanted to take you through this evolution, because something which is very relevant today may not be relevant after 10, 15 years. The ecosystem evolves, the opportunities change, the capabilities needed change, and the company has to be alive to these changes. Otherwise, you have the threat of becoming irrelevant. This slide here is a summary of the various phases every organization goes through in some ways. But this is our history. We started in 85. 85 to 90 I have not covered. At that time, the focus was on survival, making the ends meet, paying the bills, ensuring you are fulfilling the obligations to your lenders, to your vendors, to your partners, all of that. So that's a period of struggle where the entrepreneur is really working very, very hard to make ends meet, to generate enough surplus to fund your growth as well as meet your obligations. And at that time, I think there's a huge, especially for a company which is in the growth path, there's a huge demand for capital. And then we had to go to the capital market multiple times to generate the growth capital. And that's why, Dr. Reddy being a professional before that and not having a lot of resources, had to raise capital multiple times through the market. And fortunately had a good, relationship with investors, and he could be successful in that. So today we are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. At one point we were listed in Luxembourg as well as Bombay and of course the NSE. So from then on, once we established the business by 90 and saw the future of the company as being bright, we had to meet the opportunities in front of us. And all the transitions there you see are relevant to that phase of growth of the company. Initially, I think from an entrepreneur taking all the decisions, we needed to bring in professionals who can carry the burden. And I was explaining to my friend Jignesh here that how when an organization goes through these phases of growth, the emphasis shifts. Initially, when you're very strong, you do everything. You have to, when you're very small, you do that, and you can do it. Everything is visible to you. But after a while, the organization crosses a certain threshold. You need a strong team to take on the load. You need to invest in people. You need to bring in professionals, bring them, empower them, and make them do the work. Then after that, even that becomes difficult. After a certain size, you need processes. You need established systems and all the things that what we call as bureaucracy today has to come in to bring orderly growth in the enterprise. And of course, after that, even then, after some time, even that becomes difficult to run. You become fossilized through processes. So from there, if you have to grow, you'll have to build a culture and give the processes as guidance, but really people to use the values they've learned and the culture of the organization to drive growth. So somewhere, this journey is, I think, is common to many of the, at least the industrial companies that I've seen. Of course, the new generation startup software are a little bit different because they go into exponential growth without increasing resources that much because of the power of digital and the internet. But this slide here kind of summarizes various things. Initially, we had to build the organization into an organization where professionals would like to work, would want to work, can see that they are thriving here. Then, of course, as you globalize, you need to build new set of capabilities. And that is what we focused on. Intellectual property, legal, contracting, even cross-cultural management, things like that. But that in the 95-2000 period are priorities. Then, of course, we had to sustain the growth and processes and all that come in 2001, 2005. We also had to delegate down P&L responsibility from the top to the next level. So we started reorganizing ourselves into P&L-based business units, and that brought another wave of growth. Then, of course, inorganic growth. Then today we are looking at scale as the driver of our organizational initiatives. So I'll just go through each phase quickly. I've covered many of this. But here is the cultural shift we needed to do to bring in professionals from the outside into an entrepreneur-led organization. Initially, the organization was very hierarchical. All decisions were taken at the top. where information was shared on a need-to-know basis, largely a local employee base, command and control, entrepreneur-led. From there, we had to make it into a little bit of an egalitarian organization where every person was respected for who he was and what he brings to the organization. We had to become much more open and transparent with information sharing. We had to look for talent wherever it was available, not just nationally, but internationally. And of course, started moving towards values-led empowerment from a processized organization. And ultimately become a strictly meritocratic organization based on really contribution, credentials, and of course, impact. So these are some new skills that we had to learn in the 95-2000 period. I covered that already. In 2001, we went to list ourselves in the New York Stock Exchange. That was a very momentous occasion for us because suddenly we saw the inadequacies of our systems in compliance, in accounting. We had to move from an Indian system to the IFRS system and the US GAAP system. And that brought in a lot of complexity, the SEC oversight, all of that. But we used that opportunity to really reinvent ourselves. We firstly started looking at the board very differently. We wanted a board which was to the external world, not just independence from a definition point of view, but really independent-minded directors of stature, directors who could tell us, could disagree with us, and also convince us. And we created that culture, and I'll come back to governance a little later. But that was the beginning of our journey in governance, and today Dr. Reddy is regarded as one of the best governed companies in India. And we've been repeatedly recognized for corporate governance. But governance is not just about the board, it's also about how decisions are taken at various levels, transparency, information sharing, and how you take your people along. This phase is about growth, mergers, and acquisitions. And finally, as we grow a little bit beyond our own limits, things started going wrong for us. We had safety incidents, we had quality issues, and we had to really focus down on operational excellence. And in that period, we really brought in a lot of external help to really streamline how we do things, brought in continuous improvement champions, adopted things which are common in the engineering industry, like Six Sigma, all of those, to really make the organization deliver at that scale. So the lesson there was really, you have to be excellent before you can really scale, and not the other way around. I'm going to skip this. So I want to talk a little bit about ESG because that's a topical issue today. There's a lot of regulation coming in Europe which will make it necessary for all of us to have ESG targets. And even before that, climate is a big issue facing everybody. You guys in the auto industry know this much better than any of us. There's a strong investor pressure, there's a strong customer pressure, and then there's a regulation coming in, which will make ESG a very important central part of how organizations run their companies. We were always ahead of the curve in terms of environmental initiatives. In 2002, we published our first sustainability report, and since then, every year we publish our emissions, quantify all of that, and we were well ahead of the curve. But in the last few years, we realized that we were only being just less bad and not really maximally good. So in all the three areas, whether it's environment, whether it's social impact, whether it's governance, so we had a discussion with the board, and we developed an approach to do our best. What can we be doing which will really take us to leadership level in the ESG arena? And we announced some very bold goals here. So if you see the left part, and most of you will understand the environmental goals, we committed to 100% renewable power by 2030. Today, we are already there by 58% renewable today, through our own generation as well as PPAs, of course. And we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. We have achieved 48% neutrality today based on just our internal actions. And now we are taking on forestation, other ways of offsetting our emissions. So we have a plan to get to 2030. It's not easy, it's very challenging. Many companies have taken 2050 as their timeline. We have said we will take it the shortest possible time. We think we can do it, and we have a roadmap for that. And water positivity we already achieved. In 24 we achieved, and we hope to maintain it. This was the environmental goals. Then we have the social impact goals. Today we touch about 650, 700 million patients directly or indirectly through our active ingredients, partners, as well as our own direct products. Our direct products is about half of that. Indirect impact is another 300 million. So about 600 million. Since we took this very ambitious goal, our leaders have done a lot to expand the pool of patients we touch. We were never in public health. Now we've entered the area of public health. We work with the WHO, we work with the Gates Foundation. And these public health initiatives impact our numbers hugely. And we can see that in the next 2 years or 3 years, these numbers will go from the 600 to close to 800, 900 million. And by 2030, we hope to achieve this 1.5 billion patients that we touch. Of course, we're expanding patients to even healthy people, because prevention is also part of it. So we're going to redefine that. Affordability, the biggest impact on affordability happens when you're the first generic for an expensive branded product. We took a goal of 25, but we've already exceeded this. We are already at 40%. And the third one is about bringing innovation to countries which don't have access to that innovation, either directly or through collaboration. We committed to bringing in 3 new products which actually improve the standard of care. And if you look at the new drugs that are coming, each of them changes how treatments are, and they're safer in some way. So this is something we still haven't achieved, but we are on the way to get there. And on the social side, where it's about equity, social equity, gender diversity is a big problem in India. We overall as a company are 19% women, but in India we are only 13%. So we took a goal at least to achieve gender parity. That means by 2035. By 2035, we will have equal number of women and men in our company. We still don't know how to do this. We have done various simulations. It's a very challenging goal, but we committed to it. The other one is women in leadership. We have 4 women on our board, but in senior management, we have only 12% on the leadership bench. We want to change that. We want to triple it to make it to by 2030 to make it at least 35% of the leadership bench will be women. When I say leadership bench, it's the top 200 jobs in the company. Then, of course, people with disabilities. We took a goal of 3%. Again, we are stuck. We are not able to see how we will get there. With great deal of effort, we have reached about 0.45%. And we are struggling with this. I don't have a problem disclosing this, because I think sometimes you take a goal without thinking too much, and then you try to figure out, and then somewhere you innovate, somewhere you also find it challenging, and this is one of the challenging goals. The last one is about living wages for not our employees. Our employees already are beyond the living wage, but people who work for us as service providers. This is also a big challenge, because they can't selectively give high wage in our organization, even if we are willing to underwrite the higher cost, because they serve many other companies, and we're still talking to them about how to get there. The last one is about G, governance. Here we were fairly good already, but we've thought that we have to enhance our disclosures, and we took the goal of reaching the top quartile on disclosures by 2025, sorry. So I wanted to cover this topic because it brings the broader perspective of what a company does and its impacts in major areas which are not directly related to your results or financials. So on the whole, the company is founded on three big pillars. The first one, of course, is the DNA of our founder, the emphasis on science and technology. The second one is something that we built over the years. People practices, progressive people practices, to really unleash the potential of every person in the company. Our stated goal is that there should be no dead-end jobs in the company. Every person should have a path to move up in life. And that is one of the design principles for our policies and our recruitment. And the third one is about governance. Governance is not just about board, but about how decisions are made, how are they taken, how you consider risk, and a full framework of good governance. Some of the details about our science: we have multiple R&D centers in India. We have one in Bangalore in Electronic City. Hyderabad, we have two centers. We have a small campus in Cambridge, UK. And we are well known for our science, and some of our publications are really very highly rated in the scientific world. We have about 2,000 scientists, over now probably more than 400 PhDs. People practices, I think the philosophy is to bring the best, energize them, inspire them, and retain them. And create a work culture where they come into their best, they realize their full potential. And when you hire smart people, you also need to create the environment, the freedom to create impact, to work, and be motivated to contribute. And I think that is one of the things we do well. And evidence of this is that if you take any top pharma company in India, the C-suite will have at least one or two Dr. Reddy's alumni. There are about 20 CEOs globally who have come out of our ranks. There are at least 2 or 3 billionaires who have become successful businessmen outside. So it's a matter of great pride to see our people flourish both inside and outside the enterprise. Governance, again, I'm talking about the board here. So composition is just one component of running a board. The culture of the board management is very important. Giving access to board members for information in time so that they can really contribute. Creating the space and time for discussions. Listening to them. This is something especially when you disagree, and doing it respectfully. All of this, I think, is very important. So the board, when you look at a board, I think the culture with which you run the board is very, very important. And I've consistently had very good feedback from our board members, and most of them say that this is one of the best boards they've served on. So it is something that I'm very proud of. Some of my lessons here, I'm not going through all of them, but they're obvious. I think as leaders, our primary job is to motivate people, to unleash the potential each of them have. And I've seen immense potential in people. There are many stories that I can narrate here, but one that really touches my heart is a guy who used to serve tea in my office. Venki, you know him, right? This guy was extraordinarily good. If you came into my room once and went back, he would remember exactly how you like your tea or coffee or whatever you wanted, and would store it somewhere. And I just was amazed by his memory and his diligence. And we just asked him to do some coursework, become a graduate, take up a job. And suddenly now he's an entrepreneur now. He runs a company of his own. That was one heartwarming story. Another one was a union leader who used to give us a lot of trouble. Every now and then he used to come and fight with us for something or the other, but he was very smart. We noticed that, and so one day I told him, "Why are you doing this job? Why don't you do something else bigger in life?" 2 years later, he comes back to me and said, "I started a company now." said, what do you do? He said, I manage your maintenance from outside and I'm making money. And then he started doing fabrication of equipment. And today he has 3 factories, 1,000 employees. It was just brilliant for me. These are the lesser known stories, but if you go to the industry, you'll find Dr. Reddy's alumni in every large pharma company. Cipla CEO was, Umang worked with me for a long while. Same way, we have several multinational companies who CEOs from Dr. Reddy's. The other thing, and this is something very close to my heart, is that we are in the business to solve some important problem, not just to maximize our wealth. Fortunately, God has given us a lot of resources and wealth in this life, but if you aim to really maximize your wealth all the time, you will be missing the larger opportunities. And one thing, Dr. Reddy used to have this handwritten note on his board, which was, I don't know the exact words, but it was a quote by George W. Merck. He said that medicines are for the people, not for profits. And if you remember this, the profits never stopped coming. It's a little bit confusing, but what he meant is that you remember that always that you're here to serve the patient, and if you serve them well, profits will definitely follow. So that's one of the thing that is really core to our philosophy of running the business. At the same time, there are other stakeholders also. You have shareholders, you have employees, you have your partners, you have the community. The goal should be to increase value for everyone and not really cut the pie in a way that you take from somebody, give it to somebody else, take from the shareholders, give it to the employees, or take from the employees, give it to the promoters, or whatever. But I think if you take the philosophy that we are here to create ever-increasing value for all stakeholders without trading off the interests of one group against the other, it works very well. And suddenly you find opportunities coming out in many, many ways. So again, about alignment. The last one is about, I think I read this about the definition of capitalism. The brilliance of capitalism is to find solutions to difficult societal problems profitably and make them available to as many people as possible in the shortest period of time. This is how I read this definition somewhere, and I thought that was really resonated with me. Of course, we'll want to make large profits and large everything, but by solving somebody's problems in a profitable way for all of us. And I think this is the brilliance of capitalism. Of course, capitalism is not working well for many people today. The rich are getting richer, the poor are not getting benefited. So there is something that we have to think about as entrepreneurs, as business leaders. Is it working for all? And how do we make it work for all? So this, I think, is a defining dilemma for business people. I read this some time ago, early in my career. The book's name is The Living Company. This is written by an author called Ari Degus from Shell. He compares the company to a living being which is constantly learning, engaging, and thriving. He studied companies which were long-lasting, and the typical company he studied was at least 200 years old. So he studied all these companies and came out with a set of tenets which were common to all these, what he calls as living companies. And some of them I have listed here. It's not all, but some of them here. But I'd really recommend you read this book, The Living Company, to really understand how you can take some of these tenets and incorporate it into your enterprises. Conservatism in financing, sensitivity to the world around. If there is an environmental degradation, climate change happening, are we doing something about it? Awareness of your identity. Who are you at the end of the day? What are you planning to do? How do you make a difference to the world? What is the impact that your company will leave behind? Tolerance to new ideas. When you manage an organization very tightly, people will hesitate to bring new ideas to you. You give them some freedom, you hire talented people, you give them space, you give them some looseness to experiment, fail, iterate, succeed. That's how you get breakthrough growth. Valuing people more than assets, and of course, loosening the control. Organizing the enterprise for organizational learning, not just individual learning, but for the entire organization to learn. And there is a beautiful story that in the book about how territorial birds behave and how flocking birds behave. Uh, in UK, they had these bottles, and some of you who are of my generation would recognize those milk bottles, which had this thin aluminum foil cover with stripes. So they had these birds called blue tits, which figured a way to peck at that aluminum, open it up, and suck the cream which floated to the top. So they had a good, rich source of nutrition from these bottles. And they were flocking birds. They learned from each other. The whole of UK, all the birds learned to do this. And this, as a species, they really became much stronger. Robins, on the other hand, are territorial birds. If a male bird is in a certain territory, another bird comes, it will chase it away. The robins, here and there, some of the smart robins figured this out, how to get this cream. But the robins as a species never learnt this new skill, which the other bird learnt very much. The difference was, one was a territorial bird, and we all have territorial birds in our organization. I'm finance, HR has no role in my this thing, that kind of thing. There are flocking birds which mingle, which collaborate, which work with each other, learn from each other. So I thought it was a beautiful story about how nature creates, makes a species more powerful because it was flocking, collaborating, and learning versus a territorial bird. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prasad, for this very enlightening talk. Really enjoyed. For those who don't know me, I'm Jignesh Bhate. I just realized today that I know Prasad for almost 30 years now. As an entrepreneur first, then as an investor in my company for 20 years back, and as a board member on my company for almost 15 years. So I do have, if not a 360 degree, a 270 degree view. And
we used to enjoy the Gujarati food Payal used to make.
Yeah. We have enjoyed many, many moments together. So it's a privilege actually to host you on this. Sharing the dais with you is...
you can stop all that and...
No, I should say this while we are here. When Sandeep told me that, Jignesh, do you know someone who run a business with values? And those of you who know Sandeep, you will know that you don't have to answer immediately. You stop because there's more to come. So then he said values. Then he said, which are more humane and more kind of embodies them for the betterment of humanity. And immediately the first name that came to my mind was Prasad. Because knowing him for the last 30 years, I know how he has run his businesses with such a strong social conscience and extremely, extremely great value system there was no other name that could come up. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And I have a question more, again, on the values, since we talked about it. You talked about business values and Dr. Reddy's, and I know you said, for you, Dr. Reddy's and you are kind of synonymous. It's not different. But in terms of your personal value system, what are those key 4, 5 values that you on a day-to-day basis, on a personal level?
Firstly, I am not synonymous with Dr. Reddy. He was much bigger than me in terms of everything he did. He was a first generation hero. I am not. I am second generation. I had things much easier. One good thing that I learned from him was the beauty of science, appreciating the beauty of science. I am a chemical engineer, but I hated chemical engineering. I, all my electives I took were in humanities. I enjoyed the English classes, the philosophy classes much better. Uh, One of my classmates is here. We both enjoyed the English taught in our engineering more than in engineering subjects. But he opened my eyes to the beauty of science, the elegance of science. And that is something very deep in me now. And I carry the torch from him. Even though Satish and we were worked together, and Satish is a science graduate, I picked up that part of the business much more strongly than him. So that is one value that I have that I imbibe from him. I'm more pragmatic than him, and I thought he had dreams. He would dream so big, and without even understanding where to get. And I really had to struggle to understand the dream and try to put structures in place to get there. So I was the nut bolts guy, and he was, the visionary person. Uh, Personal values, you know me very well. I can't say this.
Very humble.
No,
I'll add that to that.
I won't say all that. But I don't like people who are pompous. I'll put it that way. So then I exchanged some words with your son. I'm a learner all the time, and I read a lot. I listen to people a lot. I do a podcast, everything. I'm always learning something new. I'm learning AI now.
Right. Thank you. And so in terms of, what do you do? You build business first or you build institutions first? What comes first? Building institutions or building businesses?
So in the beginning, it is the business. If you don't have a business, why do you need an institution? So you have to be viable. You have to meet your obligations first. Once you cross that stage, and I think you've crossed that stage, you have a very profitable, scaled business now. You do institution building at that point. You can't start with institutional building unless you have a very strong, powerful value proposition which is profitable from day one. It's lucky to have that. But if you don't have a value proposition which the market really needs, and there's a demand and you can do it at a lesser cost than your competitors, if those fundamentals are not there, you can create a charitable organization, an educational organization, but not a business institution.
Right.
Business comes first.
Talking about institutions and building, I think you're one of those few Indian promoter-led businesses which have done the transition to a professional CEO, and almost, I think, pioneering in that sense, from in the Indian pharma industry at least. What were the challenges? Family business moving to a professional business. How did you see that? And how did you also transpire culture and values?
Yeah, okay. So firstly, I don't think there's a difference between family business and professional businesses. I don't know how I need to explain this better, I guess. But there are good, well-managed organizations, not well-managed organizations. But we can't afford not to have professionals. We can't afford not to be a professional organization if you're of a certain scale. So I wouldn't use the word family and professional as two different. Professional and less professional is probably a word that I would use. In our case, we've been a professional organization from probably 90 onwards. We have always had the best professionals join us. Some of them have gone on to do great things in their lives, but it was a professional organization all the time. Leaving the executive role after running the organization for more than 2 decades was a decision I had made already. And I was looking for people. And I ran a search with some of the top recruiting firms in India. Couldn't find somebody who I felt comfortable handing over the baton to. And just by chance, I met this guy. One of our mutual friends introduced us. He's not an Indian. He's an Yeah. So he said, why don't you just meet him? And then I met him, and I was within 10 minutes convinced he was the right guy. Then we had the board interview him and went through the process. And it's worked out brilliantly. He does much better job than me in terms of the company's running the company. We are still a team, but he has the responsibility of running the company now.
And in terms of culture and value transition.
So initially we had a lot of difficulties there. He comes from a very hard-nosed culture. He was a ex-special operations guy in the Israeli defense, and then joined a leading Israeli company. And they're very cut and dry, very blunt. And it took him a while. He's emotionally very intelligent. So he picked it up, and it took him a couple of years to understand the culture. When people say yes, do they really mean yes? When they say no, do they really mean no? That was a struggle for him, but he now gets it. But I can tell you that by looking at the face, he gets it. And he's been learning constantly. He spent a lot of time here. And he's now as good as any Indian CEO in terms of understanding the Indian psyche.
And in terms of values, and this is my last question before I open it up to the crowd. There are lots of also younger generation here. Any message for them in terms of values on what they should imbibe?
I will turn it around a little bit. I've talked to youngsters, and I'm very impressed by the way they think. They are much more socially conscious than we were. We bought these big cars, big homes. They hate consumption. They are more into conservation. They're more aware of the planetary issues. They're more aware of the environmental issues. And I don't think we have to teach them values. We have to learn from them.
Okay. I would just pause at this time. And any questions from the audience on? Yes. Please, sir.
I'm getting you the mic.
Listen to you, and having been in similar role, I could sort of benchmark certain things which you were saying, but that apart. A serious question between family-owned enterprises transiting into, like you rightly said just now, a professional organization, and then the desire by the major shareholders, you might call, or the owners, to keep on pecking and or interfering within the organization. If it doesn't happen, I think then the professionals have a very sort of easy job. But if they do, then there are issues with regard to how the organization will evolve. Like you have done a brilliant job from whatever I can see. The second question, related not to this, is why isn't the country promoting generics?
Yeah, I'll come to that.
By the
I have a very easy answer for that I'll come to.
Yeah,
that.
but by the private, let me finish the question first of all. By the private enterprise, the government is endeavoring wholeheartedly or half-heartedly, I don't know. But I have seen examples where, for example, a generic product like amoxicillin, okay, somebody adds 0.5% of something else and it becomes a branded product, whereas it is silly. And the customer has to pay maybe multiples of what a generic will cost.
Yeah.
Why is our country lazy in promoting? Is it just because of profiteering or what?
No, I'll come to
Thank
that.
you.
I think there's a very good explanation for why. Firstly, about the promoter interference, or whatever you call it, pecking or whatever. So I think on this topic, I think the promoter has a lot vested in the company. The professional has his career vested. The promoter has all his wealth vested in the company. So to think that he's interfering is a very strong word. I think promoters should stay involved, should not interfere, should not undermine professionals. There must be a balance to that, and that's something for each family and each company to figure out what is the right equation. But to have the promoters to step aside and say, don't get involved, leave it to me for everything, I think I don't completely agree with that. I do agree with respecting professionals, giving them autonomy, holding them accountable, all that is a good way of interacting. And in fact, if they're interfering and undermining a professional, they're actually destroying their own wealth. Why would they want to do that in the long term? So this comes because of a ego. I know better is what most owners think. I know better than the professional. I have built this company. So that you may want to keep that in check as a promoter and really question yourself: am I interfering or am I adding value? The ego comes from you want to be the king, and when some other king is taking all the decisions, you feel a loss of power. As a promoter, I'm saying as a promoter, and we all go through that. It is natural to be that. But in the long run, do you want to be the king or do you want to be the rich guy? So if you want to be a rich guy and if you want to create value for yourself, your family, you need to do the right thing for the company. And if you take that posture of I will always do the right thing for the company, you will find the balance in how you interact with your professionals and the promoters. So that's that question. I don't know if I answered that to your satisfaction. The generics question I'll answer see, a brand is not just to profit from. If I have to build a brand, I have to invest in the brand. I have to detail it to doctors, and there's a whole SG&A cost, which I think you're saying is unnecessary. That's what adds unnecessary cost to the price of a product. The generic is cheap because they don't have any SG&A. They just make it and ship it. And rightfully, it is lower in cost. But when you go to a pharmacy, you buy your amoxicillin, and you don't know who made it. Are you comfortable buying and putting it in your mouth and ingesting it in a country where the regulation enforcement is so bad? I'm saying this in the closed room. But, the fakes that you get, the people not putting the active ingredient at all in the product, there are all cases of that. Do we have a good regulatory system which can prevent that from happening? If it prevents and can guarantee the quality of every product being sold, we don't need brands. Generics will work. But are we in that situation today? If somebody gives you an injection, a life-saving injection, with no brand on it, it's just generic something, are you comfortable taking it? If you don't have a name like Cipla or Sun Pharma backing it up, are you okay with that? I'm not sure I'll be okay with that. In fact, when a doctor prescribes me, I ask him, who's making this product? Is this a big enough company? Do they have established QA systems, quality systems, checks and balances?
I have a counter to that.
Yeah.
You can say generic by Dr. Reddy.
See, I can say that, but when you say generic, you don't have Dr. Reddy next to it. They'll give you in a white paper.
There are two separate things.
Yeah.
Maybe we can take this over dinner.
So, by the way, even though we are branded generics, the prices of products in India are among the lowest in the world.
I was going to say that.
Lowest in the world.
By far.
By far. So I think as an industry, we're entitled to some return.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Thank you for a very, very interesting conversation and the talk before that. I'm very heartened to see the good governance record that Dr. Reddy has. And in spite of the growing maturity of the Indian corporate sector, we do come across several instances of bad corporate governance. And there are rules and regulations that are being increasingly enforced, but still we see a lot of things that are certainly not acceptable. So I know it's a very vast subject, but can you just give us a few pointers to see how can boards exercise good governance?
So I completely agree with you, and I feel the way we run boards is completely wrong. I see the board as a resource, as a bunch of super smart people with great experience, interested in making me successful, making our company successful. So there's a lot that boards can add to the company. If you think of them as a nuisance and something to comply with, you won't get any value to it. That's why I'm not in favor of regulation as much as using the board strategically. And to do that, you have to be open. You have to share information. You have to be open to dissent. You must be able to take a no from the board. And if you're not ready for it, why do you even have a board? Because somebody said something, you have to have a board, you have a board. That is no fun in that. So I believe that governance is one thing, and board is not just governance. Board is oversight of risk, oversight of strategy, contributing to strategy, understanding your financials, giving you guidance in various other ways. And nowadays you have many committees which go into a level of detail which wasn't there in the past. I think you should use the framework of a board to your advantage, to the company's advantage. And that is an essential component of running a public company.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for a fabulous session. You mentioned the three phases of Dr. Reddy's, from technology to research to health. Now, obviously, during those transitions, there was also very rapid growth happening in the organization. So how do you balance the transformation of identity, the culture change, all of that, with the rapidity of growth and scale, which is also going on in parallel?
It's a very interesting question because we struggle with it. It's not easy. It's very, very difficult. And at some point, you also realize that the team you had has lived its purpose. And it's very, some of them can graduate and be part of the new way of doing things. Some can't. And for a person like me who's not very, decisive, this was always, a big mental battle for me, to moving people around, to letting them go, these kind of things. But you have to do it in the interest of the company. So it is a struggle. And especially when you're riding a wave of success and then you want to change things, it's not an easy thing to do. I wish I could give you an answer which is more useful, but it was a struggle for me.
But I think the overriding factor is, as long as it is for the good of the company, you see that bigger vision and take those decisions.
Yeah. So in the end, that's how you justify your actions, that it's for the greater good.
Please.
Mr. Prasad, I grew up in the pharma industry. I spent a long career with the pharma industry. And as I grew up, I saw a lot of Indian companies. I worked for an Indian company. As I see the scenario now, one sees most of the multinationals in the country have exited practically.
Yes.
So the Glaxos, Hex, Pfizer, all of them are sort of defocusing India. And some of the Indian companies which used to be so prominent in those years are also now slowly going down. And to take a name, companies like Mankind is suddenly becoming big. So, where do you see the Indian pharma industry headed? The government is trying to put a lot of regulations, but one is really worried because even the multinationals have defocused on drug research.
No, I don't think the multinationals defocused on drug research. They defocused in India, and I'll tell you why. I don't agree with you. I think it's a glorious time for the pharmaceutical industry. Today, Indian industry supplies 40% of the global volumes of generics. 1 in 3 pills in the US is made in India. The vaccines, the world depends on Indian vaccines for immunization of children. So in many ways, we have come a long way. The multinationals don't find it very attractive to work here because their margin profile is very different. When they sell a product in Europe or US, their COGS is 3%. Here we live with a 50-60% COGS. And within that balance, you have to maintain SG&A, all that. The Indian companies are doing a good job of that. For the US, for the multinationals, India is margin dilutive. And that's why they don't want to put their attention here. They're very different businesses. They're in the business of innovating, discovering drugs, spending billions of dollars on global clinical trials, and then selling them at very high premium, which is justified to recover the research costs. India is not that kind of a market. It's largely out-of-pocket market. They can't pay these high prices. So the prices are very low in India. At these price points, multinationals are not interested.
Yeah.
So the moment a patent expires, they're going away.
I'm sure you know, but just for the benefit of, from a volume perspective, India by far is the largest market in the world. But from a value perspective, it is not among the top 200. So the multinationals are not keen on this market. But sorry, please, Rastov.
Some time ago, the boundary between chemistry and biology blurred, and now the boundary between pharma, from a biology perspective, to software is blurring with the emergence of fields like computational biology. What do you see of this trend?
So I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. But the chemistry and biology, I agree with you. But biology and software is empowering the biologists by getting a deeper understanding of the structures of the large assets. So the software or the IT tools are force multipliers. And I think you're seeing huge advances in the field of biology because of the computational power available now, as well as the tools of AI, machine learning, all of those. But you're right in many ways that the portfolios are shifting from small molecules to large molecules to whole cells, and then gene editing, these kind of things. So the modalities of medicines is changing dramatically. But software is enabling that. Software is not replacing biology.
Please. Can you have a mic there? Sorry, you. Oh. I'll come back to you.
Good evening. As the businesses grow complex and diverse, so the people processes are. So what would you advise that in the people processes we must learn to let go, and what we must start unlearning?
I'm not sure I have a good answer for that question. I'll tell you what my experience in managing people is. So I think, I hope there are no HR experts in this room. I think delegating to HR is a mistake. People issues are, each of us must own our people. We know our people, I mean, the manager knows his people best. And the processes that HR gives you are a guide. But often what I see is everything is given to HR to do. And they don't do a great job of it because they don't know the intricacies of the work, how work gets done, the business, the connections, the end-to-end value chain, all of that. So that is one observation I have. Second one is I think rigid systems are not good. I think we, as even organizations are discovering more flexible systems, and especially post-COVID, this flexibility has gone to an extreme, but some flexibility is good. The other thing is, if you look at how you get the best out of people, that is by giving them freedom. Of course, you have to hire the right people. Give them the freedom, give them the broad context, and then empower them. And that's how you get, things. Systems should not become a limitation. They should become enablers. And, there are many ways of doing this, and I'm no expert in this.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
I had a very simple question. You said when you were looking for your CEO that you did a search with all the big search companies, and then you met...
One big search company, actually. Yeah.
One. But you met this Israeli gentleman, and you took a decision almost in 10 minutes. Yeah. I was very keen to know what you saw in him that made you so sure in 10 minutes.
So I can't explain this very well, but most of the important decisions, I think, come through intuition. And then what I do is, I've empirically looked at all the decisions I made through intuition, where I went against intuition. And I found, in my case, and it may not be a general principle, the intuition works better than when I go against my intuition. So I think you may have read this Daniel Kahneman's
Thinking fast and thinking slow.
Something is at work there which I don't fully understand. What I do though is I validate my decision. I took a decision, but I took 2-3 days of validation to to ensure that I'm not making a big mistake. I get other people to help me, my board members help me, all of that, and they all agreed. But the decision was made in my mind. And this happens to me a lot, and I don't know how to guard against it. So I just make the decision, but I don't express the decision for a couple of days till I'm completely sure. But,
More by the gut. Sorry, please.
Hi, good evening. So I have two questions. A, I love the tagline of good health can't wait. What are your, I know you're doing something in the GLP-1 business. What are your thoughts on, we are the #1 diabetic country in the world, or #2, getting to #1. How can people thrive on longevity, moving more, and consume less drugs? I've been on one of your drugs for 15 years, and I've used physical fitness to move more. And yeah, that's it.
I shouldn't say this being from the pharmaceutical industry, but improving your lifestyle is the best drug you can take. The GLP-1s have their side effects, the metformins have their side effects, insulin has its side effect. Whatever you do, there is something wrong about it. You're going against nature. So if you are disciplined, if you have the thing to bring your blood sugar down by itself, that is the best way to do it. As a patient, I also am on a drug, but I think if you have the willpower, the persistence, the tenacity to manage it, that is the best way to manage your condition.
Yeah. Okay.
It applies equally to cardiovascular disease, any chronic diseases. Lifestyle is the first thing you have to attack. Drugs are inevitable, sometimes you'll have to take them, but don't depend on, the GLP-1s are not miracles, they have their own effects. You lose a lot of weight very fast, but you lose muscle also. And then the longer term unknown side effects are not known. So these GLP-1s are huge successes because people don't have willpower. They want to eat and then take the medicine. So we are all,
Okay. Talking about willpower, there is one last question, and then my willpower is saying we should try and close this for
Absolutely.
dinner.
We'll
But
definitely honor that. Dr. Prasad, thank you so much. Just two very quick comments, if at all. You mentioned about gender parity, so thank you so much for that. I'm sure your company, just like many others, would expand that to gender inclusivity at certain point of time, right? The second thing is which...
so we do have transgenders in our organization already.
Sure. Right. And the second thing is, a nice takeaway which I got from you is, you mentioned that although you're a chemical engineer, you never really enjoyed that. You focus a lot on humanities. But I think that's what makes a lot of the tenets come out. Because we don't also, as a culture in engineering, promote enough of humanities and the respect for that in education. And I think that is absolutely critical as an element for bringing out the empathy and other respect and so many other things that we aspire to, but culture and humanities and so on help a lot in that. So thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. With that note, shall we...
Thank you, gentlemen, for a
Over
very
to her.
engaging session. Before we let you go, may I please invite Mrs. Reva Maini and our beautiful young Kaylee to please step forward and hand over 2 mementos.